yearning to play a few rounds of Gwent. That ought to set me straight.
Welcome to Commander's Horn, my friends, episode 107. 5 new leaders step onto the field of battle today in today's Thronebreaker leader update, which brings a huge amount of changes. I originally wrote handful, but then I saw those patch notes. Got Trynet and KingChezz to talk about it with me. Let's get this going, my friends. Good afternoon, my friends. It is January 31st, 2019. Great day for your weekly Gwent podcast. What a day it is. Season end balance. New cards come to us today, hopefully continuing Gwent's pretty serious upswing, I feel like, and solidifying the landscape for the first pro event of the year, Gwent Open number 8 in March. But let's say hello to my guest today, being joined on this brand new look for Commander's Horn. It's kind of a landmark episode for me, so huge shout out to TN Gabor for supplying me with these fancy new graphics and teaching me how to be better at OBS as well. So this is just great stuff, and joining me on this show is we have, well, let's say hello first to the champion of Wild Hunt number 1. Almost a year ago, we met. It's the Blue Coin Kid, F2K, Fate to Karma's Trynet123. Thanks so much for joining me on the show today, Trynet.
Good to be here.
And also joining me, true royalty indeed, with the crown in absolute, definitely in character right here. One of the more active players in the course of the game. Top 25 global in Season 8 from Team Leviathan, KingChezz, a.k.a. Chezzy93 on the rankings. Good to have you, my friend.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So, did you both do an end-of-season push, or I mean, you obviously both played on the pro ladder. You're both top 50 players, if you include them, if you include both of you in that number. Were you doing a push at the end of the season, or have you been just kind of waiting for the patch? How was the last week, Trynet? How did you do this week?
So since Homecoming, the new ladder system kind of punishes you for experimenting a bit. Once you lose a bunch of games, you're off peak, and it's a pain to get back up there. So what I've been doing is, for the most part, I've just been try-harding my placement games. And I think since my placements finished, I gained 50 MMR over the course of the season. Right now, the main goal that I have in Gwent right now is just to grow my stream. And from what I've noticed, finding a sick brew does more for viewership than having a 70% winner at established decks. So I've just been doing that.
Yeah, and it's a lot more fun to stream a brew that's winning. Because then
Definitely.
you're just like, oh, the combo's working again. You know there's going to be highlights plenty. Yeah, that's always a good time. But winning is also fun. KingChezz, did you do a lot of winning this month, or have it, it was an interesting meta, right? It's post Mulligan patch, so the game is much better, but it's pre the tournament thing, the tournament meta that's coming up with the new leaders. So this was an interesting month. How did you take it, KingChezz?
Well, I'm basically the opposite to Trynet. I start out by just playing some random stuff, just getting through my placements, seeing what's what. And then I finish my placements. I'm super disappointed with my scores, and then I start tryharding with some meta decks. So that's pretty much how it goes. I did have a bet on with Shin Miri and Lord Bushwook this season for who would finish higher. So I actually did a 12-hour stream at the end of the season because I was about 30 MMR behind Shin Miri, but just couldn't quite catch him. Didn't quite go.
Shin Miri, I think, placed 20 in the rankings.
Yeah,
it was the same as when it was when I went to sleep. Yeah. So yeah, Shin Miri did a pretty decent job. 20. You ended up 23, I think it was, or 22. Yeah, that's you're no slouch, King. That's really good that you guys are still pushing. And this is now going to be it's going to be a pretty interesting week coming up because not only do we have the new leaders, but we also have the preparation for Gwent Open number 8. Sorry, the qualifiers. We're going to talk about that in the news. But I just wanted to talk a little bit more about you guys because it's the first time both of you are on the show. I have met you before Trynet, and I've talked to you many times, KingChezz. Actually, last time I talked to you, KingChezz, you were talking. This is a while ago. Because it's vintage Gwent stuff. But you were really, really high on Nilfgaard soldiers. You played a ton of Nilfgaard soldiers when they were at their peak. Arguably, probably before that. I don't think we saw it very competitively until much later. Have you found a deck like that that's really clicked for you? Would you even say that was your favorite deck of vintage Gwent? And is there a deck in Homecoming that's given you kind of the same feeling as that?
So I'd definitely say that Nilfgaard Soldiers was my jam. I ended up playing over 1,000 games in open beta with it towards the end. Um, I actually, so a buddy of mine's the guy who came up with the list in the end, and yeah, I pioneered it. Like I was playing it long before most people got my first 1400 pro ladder score with it, and really loved that deck. So I was sad to see it go. I see they brought back slave infantry. I tried to make it work, but with 2 bronzes and only one sentry, so to call. I mean, Green being the sentry now, it's just not enough support for the soldier archetype to thrive. It's a decent little package you can run in other decks, but it's not enough for its own thing. But post Homecoming, the decks I've liked the most is I like Nilfgaard, so been working with Nilfgaard. This season I actually created my first successful deck, because I'm not much of a deck builder, but this season I did a card advantage Morvran deck where basically you abuse Ciri Dash, you Letho Kingslayer to get double dash, you use Avalak to make it immune. You end up getting like triple lasso with Rot Tossers, Isabel, and you just do some good stuff with that. That was my top score this season. And I also did a Francesca combo deck, which was nowhere near as good as that Morvran deck, but that was a lot of fun. You Blue Dream unicorns, and you play 3 or 4 unicorns, then you've got Call of the Forest on Aguara True Form to get another unicorn, and then Francesca the unicorn to get Aguara back out and stuff. It was pretty fun. That was quite fun. That was a really fun deck to play. Not quite as competitive, but a lot of fun.
That's really great. I was talking to a couple of people that always, like, I think even Shinmiri was talking to me about how, like, you can engineer these like triple unicorn decks, like all these crazy decks that nothing like this ever happened against me. I feel like there are these like absolutely disgusting decks I never saw and I never played. So you're both huge Nilfgaard fans, though. I know that for sure. And Trynet, you came, so it was almost a year ago, you won Wild Hunt #1 in Philadelphia. You posted a great recap on Reddit where you called Gwent a strange game or a weird game. And you went over the fact that, you know, you're either attacking or defending based on the color of the coin. And because you don't really ever have to go first, you probably shouldn't, because long round decks are the ways to win in that old format. You just get more cards and you play a better long round, and then you close it faster. Obviously that's different now with the tactical advantage, the hand limit. Do you still find Gwent strange in the same way? Do you feel like the flow of the game is better or worse now, Trynet?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question. So by having a better long round than your opponent before, you could afford to dry pass everybody. You never actually had to go first. You'd always get always get at least one long round, right? You'd play round 2 and either you get card advantage out of that, ideally, or you would be losing because your opponent was able to beat whatever you were doing in a long round. Now, the hand limit prevents straight dry passing, but with drawing 6 cards between rounds 1 and 3, that means that if you can win round 1, you never have to play a short round at all, right? Because you're getting basically refilling your hand going into round 3 by just dry passing round 2. So now the shortest round is 6 cards. So even if you need to play every card in round 1, you're still minimum 6 cards, which is only 4 cards less than the maximum round length. So while Gwent is still definitely a strange game, and there's still that concept of attack and defender, now round 1 is much more important than it was before. Rather than round 1 being a fight for just card advantage, now if you don't win round 1, you don't have really any say over the length of round 3 at all, where before a long round 1 still made for a shorter round 3, win or lose. So I think personally I prefer the way that it was before to an extent. Tactical advantage is a really nice upgrade over the previous system. That's something that could have been slotted into the old system very well.
Yeah.
But having so many draws between round 1 and 3, I think is a pretty big negative. Given the option between just the old system with just tactical advantage added and the current system with 6 draws and hand limit, I'm pretty sure I'd take the old way.
Yeah, it is hard to get past the fact that, you know, you try so hard to win round 1, you maybe do it, maybe it costs you a whole bunch, maybe you had to spend the extra card, and then you know that your opponent's going to get 6 cards before the deciding round is being played, unless you are in a bleed state, a bleed situation, like you're playing just a really good deck that can do that, like Elder or something like that. So it's the 6 cards, I think, it's not troubling, but it doesn't feel fantastic. I kind of like I'm very lukewarm on that aspect, but I don't know how else to do it, because the 3 cards per round doesn't seem so bad, but we both know that round 2 is always, the decision is play or not. The decision isn't play some, it's play at all. So that,
and a lot of times the decision is just based on the matchup too.
Yeah, exactly. exactly. What you have, what you're able to actually do. So, I think that's, I think that the flow of the game has changed. Yeah, but I think that there might be, but one of the great things about the Mulligan patch is they didn't tweak too much. However, we got, I feel like, at least 100 changes in this patch. We're not going to talk about every single one, but we're going to talk about some key changes. And before we jump into the news, which we're going to do right now, just want to let you know this episode of Commander's Horn is recorded live on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/McBearded, and will be posted on YouTube, where you can find me as McBeard. Commander's Horn usually records on Thursdays, like today. Start times varying on the guests. Today, both of my guests happen to be available at my stream start time, so here we are at 11 a.m. This podcast is posted on the feed, iTunes, and on YouTube at youtube.com/c/McBeard on the Commander's Horn playlist, which this will be uploaded to right when we're done. And finally, this episode is brought to you, as all episodes are brought to you, by the Commandos.
Commandos!
Our patrons at patreon.com/CommandersHorn. And, of course, the big news today is quite clearly the new patch that we just got about 3 or 4 hours ago, I suppose. And, we have balance changes to existing leaders and decks, but also added 5 new leaders to finally finish the core set of Gwent, but actually finish it. Like the arena update was supposed to do almost a year ago. So let's talk about all of this and more right after this short break. But before we dive into this giant pile of patch notes, I do want to talk to you guys about, there is a news item that is not related to this patch, because things are happening very fast. I talked to you guys really quickly before we started this podcast. I called Gwent the time traveling game. It made us wait. It pressed pause for 6 months, and then it pressed fast forward to the future where we have the sequel to the game. And now we're getting new leaders, and we're getting an expansion in March, and we actually have the first major event, Gwent Open number 8, coming up in March. And the qualifier, which is open to the top 100 crown point earners over December and January, takes place on February 9th and 10th, which is a week away from a patch. Now, Trynet, you felt like this was very, very soon. I'm fine with the Gwent. I'm fine with the game moving quite fast now, because I feel like we've had to do a lot of waiting, and I think that the gears are really, really moving. But do you think it's a little bit too fast for qualifiers?
Putting together a conquest lineup with just a week of preparation is so crazy. Just because we don't even know what the metagame looks like what decks are good. Mm-hmm. It takes so long to find that out. So there's not going to be really any targeting that you can reasonably do unless we do anything, unless we find something that's just metagame breaking. Yeah. We know we have to target something like that. But man, it just feels like everyone's going to be stuck playing a few good stuff decks without too much real conquest strategy. Now, that's not a bad thing, but man, it's not a regular tournament for sure.
Do you guys have you done qualifiers before? King, you've done one before, I'm sure, or a couple.
Yeah, I've done several.
Yeah, and Trynet, you've done one as well.
I did one, yeah.
Yeah, it takes a lot of time, right? Like if you do well enough to get to day 2, that's your whole weekend. So you gotta even if you I guess bottom out immediately, you still have kind of made time over the entire weekend to play. So the top 2 finishers that takes place in the qualifier on February 9th and 10th will join us, and I say us like, the broadcast team and all the other players, the top 6 players as well, in Warsaw. Both of you're going to be playing in this qualifier. Do you find something, also there's the other question I want to extend to as well. Do you find excitement? King, you said you find excitement in brewing and doing well. Do you find excitement in the quick brew that you have to do, or the quick kind of consultation you're going to have to do, both of you with your teams, to get this lineup together in a week? There's some fun in that, right, King?
Yeah, I actually think my favorite part of Gwent is these qualifiers. This is what this is my favorite part of the whole Gwent season. I love doing this. I've actually had some success in the online qualifiers and stuff. And yeah, I love the Swiss format is it's a bit of pot luck, right? It depends on what you queue into. You can't really target anything in the Swiss format. You just bring what's strong, maybe do a soft target or something. If you go all in, then I guess if you go all in on the targeting, you've just got to get lucky with who you face. But then day 2 is when it really kicks in, right? And you've got some real thinking to do, and it's a lot of fun. And honestly, since I joined Team Leviathan, it's been even better, right? Because like you have other people who have the same passion and interest in building these decks and getting ready for these tournaments, and it's a really, really exciting time. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Right on. And I guess I'll extend the question to you as well, Trynet. Do you find any excitement in as far as opposed to the stressfulness, I guess, of the quick preparation time, knowing that you're going to go into a tournament full of matchups and possibly decks that you have never seen before, potentially?
So in every other card game that I played, I always really enjoyed the preparation aspect for a tournament, where I always kind of hated the actual tournament itself. It was sort of just like you did all this preparation and then you played in a tournament, but the preparation was the fun part and the tournament was just kind of work. I kind of treat this the same way. I'm going to really enjoy the next week where I'm finding decks and trying to find a lineup that works. But I'm not looking forward to the tournament at all.
Well, because it's stressful, right? It's always this is the high stakes this is the high stakes stuff. Like you got the ticket in to the arena here, but boy, is it going to be it's going to be a bloodbath for sure.
Kind of. It's also just the fun part is the planning too.
Yeah, that's fair. And this Gwent Open will be a very unique event. It's the one and only CD tournament that will take place after Homecoming, but before the first official expansion, which is expected in April, I believe. And we're probably going to get a preview of it on that very same broadcast in March for Gwent Open. But like I said, it's moving very fast. This is the only tournament we're ever going to see before the expansion, which we possibly were maybe expecting last year around this time, when things appeared to be we were still reeling from midwinter, I guess, at this point. They were just patching out dwarves. It's crazy how far we've come. How do you guys feel about the state of the game in general? I'll throw it to you first, King.
So the state of the game at the moment, I think that the Mulligan change was a massive improvement. I just want to say that before that, it was tough. It was tough being a Gwent player following Homecoming's release. It was tough. The Mulligan change I'm actually amazed at how much it improved the game and the enjoyment level. I do think there's still some issues. I think it was maybe Tailbot or maybe Adskoff, one of the top players. They did a tweet about how the fact that post Homecoming, a lot of it is that it feels bad because there's so many bronzes you just don't want to play, and you want them at the bottom of your deck, right? Yeah. And if you end up drawing too many of those bronzes and your opponent didn't, then there's nothing you can do. And that's still an issue with the game right now. And that is why Skelliger is so strong, because Skelliger can just discard them, right? They've just got Darren to just throw them all away, Burner to throw them away. They don't have to see those bad cards, hence why Skelliger gets all these good scores. And that still feels really bad. But other than that, I think the metagame's pretty healthy. Skelliger obviously is slightly stronger than the rest because of that. But Monsters is good, Nilfgaard is good. Scoia'tael has Shiru, and Northern Realms have Meve now, right? So
I think you're a couple days late for that one.
No, I mean,
still have the card. It's still a card that does stuff, but they didn't get much. We're going to go into the patch notes soon, but I've seen a lot of people say Scoia'tael gets the Shiru nerf, and what do they get?
Well, we'll see. I think Scoia'tael and NR are still behind, right? They still need some help. It'll be interesting to see what Meve does, because I think Meve is going to be potentially mix things up, but I think Monsters and Skelliger are going to be really strong, because I think Nilfgaard suffered a little bit more than those two in the recent patch. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think the metagame's quite nice. It's just maybe there's a few things that they need to change gameplay style.
And Trynet, I kind of already asked you how you felt about the flow of the game already, but if there's anything else you wanted to add to that, kind of like how you feel about the state of the game before we jump into the news, because we're going to talk about these 5 new leaders and we're going to go through some of these patch notes. But if there's anything else you wanted to say about kind of like playing the game, how you feel about the state of the game right now, it's important.
So like Chez said, with the bronzes, it used to be that before Homecoming, the bronzes were the core of your deck. It was what you built everything around. Mm-hmm. Now, like I said, they're just cards you don't want to see. You just always want to mulligan them. You want to discard them. You don't want to have to play them, because all the power in your deck is just concentrated in your one of golds. And I don't know. I don't like that. but
I guess
it's the way it is now.
I guess the point of view probably from a higher level perspective than what I'm playing at is like I feel like the bronzes aren't that bad. Like I feel like especially when you're fighting for round 1, those are the bronzes you want to squeeze the value out of so you still have a bunch of good gold cards still left in your deck, or you feel better about mulligan something like late game that you would need like a Renew or whatever, or a Hand Marvin's Blue Dream, or maybe like a win condition like Sabrina if you're playing Northern Realms. I feel like you look at a card like Trident Infantry, you look at a card like any of the engines for Nilfgaard, Magni, Nausicaa, like those are cards that can achieve like 6 to 8 points. And if you were able to do that with the bronzes, did you not get some sort of advantage on your opponent if they had to spend something higher than that? Like I feel like when you look at a game that has like a resource management of some kind, like Magic the Gathering or Hearthstone, when if you paid more to remove than it costs to play, you have like a mana advantage, or you have some sort of advantage on your turn. In Gwent, since it doesn't cost anything to play a card, you really only feel like you have the advantage if your opponent used a higher cost card to deal with your little baby unit, and then you have more babies to like. This is why I think Queen Meve might have a place like in longevity. We can kind of sort of jump into it. We talked about Meve and Ardal last week, so I don't know if we're going to like obsess over them, although I think that the Ardal thing is interesting because having a muzzle in your deck all the time in your hand at all times, and your opponent knows you have it at all times, sounds fine. But apparently, even Nergard was saying on Twitter, if you guys know Deck Builder and Nergard, I just saw his tweet. He said Ardal was worse than he thought, and he was not hot on Ardal to begin with. I actually think that he would be fine, but I haven't played yet, so I don't know. But I feel like a card like Meve makes your bronzes better, which means that the deck that you have remaining for the decisive round 3 could be just better than your opponents if they had to work harder to bust down the boosts, to bust down, an engine that you made a 4 or a 5, and they don't have that ping, so you get the value out of it, and then all of a sudden your deck doesn't have to work as hard in round 1. Like that's how I feel like it should feel. Like your deck, you line up the combos, you let the crappy bronzes if you have them. I say crappy, but none of them. I mean, if you're putting bad cards in your deck to discard, you're definitely playing Skellige, right? You're putting wolves in the graveyard with Dane and stuff like that. But if you can make your lower cards work really hard, should that not set you up for success for round 3? I mean, I don't know.
Not necessarily, because you only get to play 16 cards over the course of a game.
Mm-hmm.
And there's plenty of decks that are just playing like 12 to 13 golds that they all want to play. So as soon as you play that 4th bronze, that's 1 gold you're not playing.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I never really thought about it like that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really think that's the granular details that probably.
The other problem is that there's 1 or 2 bronze cards that are actually gold card value, right? You've got like a Magni, for example. Yeah. You did that. Magni was overstated, right? It got a nerf, and probably justifiably so, because it was just a gold. It was like you would play that over a gold card quite often. There's plenty of gold cards worse than Magni. Arakaspor, another one, right? It's just really good value. Pirate Captain being another one. There are 1 or 2 of these bronze cards that are just really, really well started, and you don't mind playing those cards. You draw them, you're like, that's fine. I'm not going to don't want to discard that one. I'll keep it, right? But the large majority of bronzes are underwhelming, right? And like Trynet said, you only typically play 16 cards. You can easily fill a deck with 13 to 14 gold cards, right? So then if you end up not seeing 5, 6 of those gold cards, and your opponent does see all 12, you're in a massive disadvantage, right? And it's not through play or anything. It's just through luck of the draw sort of thing. Whereas old Gwent, you didn't really have that. Possibly through tutoring and stuff, but more so because you wanted to see all of your cards, right? Your whole deck had synergy and stuff. Everything had a place in the deck, whereas I don't feel like in Homecoming all your cards have a place in the deck. They're just there to make up the provisions.
I mean, it feels better now than it felt in December. That's for sure.
100%.
Oh, yeah,
Thinning is better for all of the reasons that you just said. But I feel like, it's not guaranteed that a gold card's automatically better than a bronze card if you can't hit your synergy. Like, let's say, like, Geralt Professional can't... Well, that's a bad example. Geralt of Rivia, or, something else. Like, you actually end up playing because your opponent played around it well enough. So I actually find it really interesting. Gwent, at the higher level of provision cost for golds, they become more and more situational, and they become more and more likely to brick, which means that if you spend the provisions to put it in, and you whiff it, you have lost it's almost like you've lost more than 1 card at that point. But I mean, it all is about the end number in round 3. And no matter what way you cut it, if you draw a wolf pack in round 3, you feel absolutely terrible, and there's no way you can make it better. So, I mean, It is what it is. I feel like the game is, there's a lot to dissect when you compare it to Vintage Gwent. When you look at it standalone, I feel like we're really not far from, like, I've heard things about we can make round 2 feel more better. We can make round 2 more fun if there is some sort of bonus for the person who is down a card going into it, usually the person who won the round. If there was, because right now round 2 kind of feels like this nebulous area and, you know, this bronze card situation. But I mean, if this is all we have to say about the gameplay, I feel like we're in a much better position than some of the stuff that was going on in Vintage Gwent, some of the absolutely broken stuff. So we're getting there. We're balancing. We're adding new stuff to the game. So let's talk about these new leaders. So we talked about Ardal and Meve last week, but let's do a recap here. Nilfgaard's Ardal sees a unit at 3 power or less, but you can increase this ability's power by 1 for each 4 tactics you put in your deck. So kind of a throwback to Alchemy, gives you straight up a muzzle, old school muzzle in your hand at all times. This is why I thought it was going to be okay. Apparently, maybe not. I don't know. Queen Maeve is boost a unit by 1 with a cooldown of 2, the simplest leader, but also maybe the most appealing leader for that Northern Realms could have got. Maybe. I mean, when you look at the other ones are all so interesting. Meve is less interesting, but the synergy with the faction is fair, and it's going to be fine.
Yeah.
Arniolf is play self, which is a 9-point unit, and then play 3 sirens on the opposite row and damage them by 1. So you give your opponent 3 damaged ones, and you get a 9. Dane transforms a trap into a 3 strength vanilla elf. And finally, the latest addition that we just saw yesterday, Gurnikora spawns Gurnikora's fruit, which is a 1-power doomed thrive unit. Refresh this on turn start if you don't control any fruits, and we've already seen a little taste of what this deck can do. I think we've talked about it a little bit before the podcast started. So now that all 5 of these reveals are out, you know, we have these seem to like flesh out the game. ST adds value to trap cards. SK adds value to bloodthirst cards. Monsters adds value to artifacts, apparently. Trynet. You were saying
adds value to everything. The card's nuts. It's a 19-point leader.
19-point.
It's 19 points.
It's good.
You don't need a dagger. You just put it in your deck and it's a 19-point leader. Minimum. If you play Spears, it's more. If you play Slizards, it's more.
Yeah, so if you're not
crazy.
If you're not following what Trynet is saying, when Gurnikora spawns the fruit, it counts as playing a unit on the board, which actually triggers your artifact, which Spears and Shields were nerfed. They cannot be used unless you play a unit first. Well, Gurnikora never, ever, well, not never, but doesn't have that problem if there's no unit. So you don't have to play units. You always kind of have a unit in your hand or on the board, one or the other. Something always to buff, something always to thrive. So it's super interesting. I haven't tasted how you use the word degenerate, which is not a word that people throw around lightly, or do they? I don't know.
Oh, yes, it is.
It is?
I don't think the artifact deck is necessarily the best way of using it. It's just the most abusive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You can just play a mid-range deck with it, and it's still insane.
I mean, Gurnikora just seems good, right? Just seems like very, very good. You always have a unit on the board, which matters. Your opponent can't really get rid of it because you just get another one. I mean, in my mind, it just seems like, okay, well, it's going to have like a lot of boosts involved in that deck, so maybe I can just run Erden and hope to beat it in round 3. But I don't know. KingChezz, which leader do you think is going to be the most popular out of all these leaders? They're all very interesting with the exception of maybe Meve, but Meve's utility makes up for it. What do you think is going to be the most popular leader among the player base?
So this is an interesting question. We've had a lot of discussion about this back at the team, getting ready for the tournament and stuff. And I think we're a bit split on between obviously the new Monsters leader and Meve. I personally think Meve's going to be the number one because not only does she like the problem Meve has is that she's in the worst faction, right? So she might not be very good because she's part of the worst faction. Sorry, all Northern Realms fans, but that's just how it is, right? It's just, however, she may make them more viable, right? Because the fact that any engine card that is at 4 strength's the golden number, right? 4 is like you can't remove it without like dedicated removal, right? Like Ifrit or Karen X or something. 4 is too big for most bronze removal, right? It can't deal with 4s, which is why Magni Division was such a good bronze card, right? Because it instantly comes down at 4. So like that 4 is the golden number, right? Obviously, if you can get the 5, which is like botchling, that's even like 5 is perfect because that just removes everything, right? But 4 means that only like high removal high damage cards can deal with it, right? So Meve allows all of those three power engines to survive, right? Which is really useful for Northern Realm. So I think that she might be able to do it. I think it's going to take time to see how good that's actually going to be, how impactful it will. But I think Meve is good. The other thing that Meve has over all the other leaders is she's 17 provisions, right? And you look at the meta right now, it's all the high provision leaders that are being played. You've got Woodland because he's the most. You've got Crack because he's the most. You've got all right, ST doesn't count because Proof is just the best, right? You've got
Full Test is also arguably. I mean, that's probably my favorite leader. I feel like he's the strongest. Honestly, I could be wrong. He has the worst.
I'm pretty sure Ada became the number one NR leader, right?
She number one?
I played. She became number one pretty much.
A lot. Like the only rival in our deck.
Morvan completely overshone Emir, which people didn't expect, right? Everybody just thought Emir shit was good, and then Morvan came along with 18 provisions, and his ability is not that good. Like, it's a buff. It does mean you can keep engines alive like Meve, which is nice, but it's more the provisions, right?
Yeah.
It's the provisions. It's a massive difference, which is why I personally don't think the Monsters leader is going to be any good, because granted, it's a lot of points, right? But it means you've got to fill your deck with more of these bad bronzes, right? And that is an issue. So even though she is powerful and that is good, you can just run Woodland that is unbeatable in a short range 3, right? If you've got last save, because it's like a 20-point finisher, right? That's just really, really hard to beat, and he's got 3 extra provisions. So I'm still sticking to the fact that I don't think the Monsters leader will be that great because of the low provisions. However, I might be wrong, because she does just have some insane value that she can generate. But yeah, I think Meve with the 17 provisions is probably the best one of the bunch.
Even in a 3-card round, Gurnikor is still a 4-point leader in just that round.
Yeah, but that's half the amount of points.
It's half, but that's just the one round. That's not including all the value you got previously.
True. I mean, Elder, you could say the same thing. Most cases will get you 4.
Elder's way more situational, though. You need to build your deck more around Elder. You can just splash Gurnikor.
That's true.
Yeah, that's fair. I agree. That's the thing about Gurnikor. Gurnikor and Meve, the female additions to the leaders, seem to be more about just rounding out the faction and giving more to it. I don't know if Monsters needed that much more. Northern Realms definitely did. But I think, but what you're saying, King, is probably exactly what the designers want you to say. It's a good ability. It's strong. Low provisions might make it not that great. So that's why she's balanced like that. She was given a strong ability, and she was giving the worst provisions out of every leader except for Usurper. And Emir now? Is Emir at 12 now?
Emir's 12.
Emir's at 12.
So that's not... Now, after everything you just said about Morvan, that seems a little off, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I don't understand it in the slightest, but there we go.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I think that... I think that Gurnikor, I like it. I like that she is... you're kind of hemming and hawing. I mean, Trynet, you said that Gurnikor with this artifact, the way you can use artifacts and the way you get so many points out of it, you said it was like Ethna artifact back when it was bad, but not better than. And I think probably, I don't know, were the pros growing out of that at the time of its nerf? Like, where do you place
I think so for the most part. Yeah, the deck was good, but I don't think it was even necessarily the best Scoia'tael deck.
I mean, there was a lot of people got 2650 plus with it in season 1 with artifacts. I mean, it was pretty strong.
I mean, there were some players that were playing artifacts in every faction.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a guy who played literally all factions. Artifacts,
right? I was talking to
Again, not saying it was bad, but I'm not saying that it was necessarily the only thing that you could be doing.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
it wasn't totally oppressive over the game,
which is good for the meta. I mean, if there's different options, that sounds like a control option, and the problem is that before, control was just too strong, so it felt like nothing was on the board ever, which is not what this game's supposed to feel like. But I also like that it feels different from Vintage Gwent, where you had 15 things on the board on each side, all at different numbers, all doing things. Now, at least, it actually feels like round 1 you're kind of vying for board control and position, and it feels like almost like there's combat. If your engines, your damn sorceress removes an elven swordmaster, and then something comes down and pings the damn sorceress. I do like that minion combat feel of round 1. I do like that a lot. But I mean, it has a lot of appeal to me, just kind of as someone who's played a lot of card games. I feel like it's brought Gwent out of kind of it was a very strange game, Vintage Gwent. This one feels like with the provision balancing, like that second stat to balance off of, not just the strength of the card. I feel like there's just a lot more to it, and these new leaders give it to you, give a little bit more to the game. Which leader do you think? I'm trying to think. I think I find Grenakor the most interesting, but probably Arnyoff. Now, I think Trynet, you said you played a little Arnyoff today. Did you? Did you give it a shot?
No, I was going to, but I got distracted by the monsters leader.
Got distracted by the monsters leader. Arnyoff, I think, is probably. I mean, I don't know if he's. I think Ardal might be the sleeper, but what do you guys think about Ardal? You're both huge Nilfgaard fans. You guys are looking at Morvran, probably just rubbing your hands together, like this is just a great leader that we still get to use. And then Ardal comes along, and just to again reference just some of the tweets that I saw, I just want to reference Nurgard because Nurgard is somebody I talk to on a fairly regular basis, comes into the stream a lot when I'm playing, offers me some deck lists, and he said that Ardal was unimpressive. Why do you think? This is just an open question. Why do you think a leader that has the ability that Ardal has would end up just not being that good? And if the answer is just provisions again, then I don't know.
If nobody's playing engines, then why bother?
Because
you don't need a muzzle if stealing their engine doesn't give you extra value.
But could still be a last, say, 8-point swing, which lots of leaders have made a lot of wins out of. Why would that?
Well, if you're getting 8 points, you're putting tactics in your deck.
Mm.
You're probably just going to be 6, so you're playing Morvran.
So the other problem he has, right,
you're
is
putting
that
4 at least into an Ardal deck because like there's at least 4 like fine tactics.
No, why bother?
Why bother?
You can just damage just like a 5 and then take it.
So you're just saying it's bad. You're just saying that the leader is not going to offer you as anything.
No, if engines are good and it's valuable to like damage a 5 to a 3 and then steal it, I could see that being playable.
Sure.
All right, so I think the biggest drawback to him, right, is engines are pretty much always played round 1. So you want to steal round 1, right? Leaders you don't want to be using round 1. So Ardal's basically his ability is a round 1 ability, which is not what you want on your leader. You want as many points as you can get in round 3 off your leader, and it's counterintuitive, right?
But it influences the way your opponent plays at all times. I would imagine. I mean, I hoped it would. Like I see Ardal, I'm worried constantly until it's used.
So the thing is, right, is in round 1, if you're playing round 1 and, for example, I play an 8-point engine, or I play an 8-point card in round 1, right, and I'm playing against Adder. If I see my opponent use their Adder, I'm like, that's great. I'm really happy about it, right? I'm not playing around them using their Adder to kill my I don't know, my Magni that's at 8 strength or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's a bad trade for my opponent. Mm-hmm. And it, like, if they're committing their leader in round 1, that's a good trade for you, even if they're killing something high value, right? Because that's carryover, and like it's a lot of points in round 3 that they're not going to have. So I'm willing to sacrifice that. Leader abilities are worth up to a card, if not more, in round 3 quite often, right? So if you end up losing on even, but your opponent used their leader ability, you're quite often happy with that outcome more than getting through the round with your card and them still having their leader ability intact.
I mean, you make a good point. It feels like if you're not using your leader to win the game, it doesn't feel like he's very good, I imagine, he or she. So, I mean, what I was hoping for is that Ardal sees play in the future, maybe when, like, Ardal is a card that's been added to the game that is like a present day and a future day card. Like every tactic that added to the game, Ardal is now considered. And I love that because that's something about Gwent. Like Vintage Gwent took it too far, right? They had a tutor for everything. So if they added a card to the game, it was basically like, all right, so here's the card we're adding to the game. Now we have to add +1 for this faction because they can tutor it, and +3 for this card because it can tutor it. So, I mean, it was probably like just a nightmare to like create a card that was 15 in a different way than the other 100 cards were 15 as a bronze card. So at least there's cards in the game like that that will always make us think. You know, every Bloodthirst card added to the game, we're going to think about Arnyoff, and every trap that's added to the game, we're going to think about Dane. Like, this is important stuff.
Yeah.
Like, where as far as Miv and Grenakor, like their abilities are just going to be as they are. You're going to play them just like you said. You could splash. You could. You know, Miv is good in a way that Full Test could be because the boost is similar, but you can use it more. So, is that worth the zeal? Is that worth the provisions? There's a lot of ways to look at it, but I mean, we're coming up on quarter to the hour, and we haven't even talked about a patch note yet. So, last parting shots, guys, on leaders in general, because we didn't really talk a lot about Eldane's story. Scoia'tael fans, maybe we'll get somebody. Well, maybe we'll get a bit more experience there. But I mean, Eldane.
There's nothing to say about him.
There's nothing to say about. I mean, like that's kind of Pumpkin's early take on it was that he wasn't very good either, but he still gave it some thought, mused about how you always have a target for Call of Forest, let's say. You always have strength that's like untargetable, but you are giving up the other leader slot for that.
You're putting traps in your deck.
You're putting traps in your deck, and some people want to do that, and at least you have a leader that makes them better. And traps got buffed, so for some people, this is probably exactly what they wanted. And I'm talking like, you know, if we're saying that it's not competitively viable, okay, not every leader can be, and of course they can't. I don't want them to add 5 OP leaders to the game. God no, please. Then it's either this or Usurper, basically. But I think that generally what they added was just to make the game feel more full for people who wanted to play a certain way. And I think that Eldain does accomplish that, maybe not at a competitive level, but it's still, I think it's fine that they got this leader. I think that this leader will be relevant possibly in the future, and they will make him relevant in the future.
I think the one problem he has, right, is that he actually contradicts some of the cards in Squirtle. So like, for example, Pyrotech can use those traps, right? But he can't use those traps if Eldain's turned them into elves, right? He can no longer be used in synergy with traps, right? Same with Half-Elf Hunter. He needs traps on the board to be able to deal damage. Well, if Eldain's turned them into elves, he can't deal damage, right? So it kind of contradicts a few of the Squirtle cards, which I don't know if they're going to go back and maybe tweak those cards so that they're not fighting for the same value or not. Because if you want to get a trap archetype to work, you need them all to be working in synergy, not fighting for the same value, right? So
yeah, I mean, you could
that's one thing on that.
You can look at it like that. I mean, I think that's a fair thing to say. Absolutely, obviously, that it hurts some synergies. But you could kind of say the same thing about playing. You know, you have Temerian Drummer and you have Vest, but you also have Full Test. So you have a leader that gives zeal and you have cards that give zeal. So you don't necessarily play Temerian Drummers in a Full Test deck, but you would use Temerian Drummers in Northern Realms because zeal is very important to Northern Realms. So I wanted to believe, again, I haven't really gotten hands-on with any of this stuff yet, so this is all speculation for me, but I wanted to believe that Eldain at least filled the role that if you wanted to play Eldain, you don't need to play. The thing is, no one's playing these cards anyway, these artifact. Well, there's a couple of, you see the odd Elven Scout here and there with some Mahakam Horn Bamboozle stuff, but like the Pyrotechnician, I don't think that card is ever going to see play, but like it's at least it's reusable, but again, you want to use your artifacts for damage. Eldain wants to use the artifacts for proactive strength. So it's only the traps as well. So we'll see. I mean, Dwarven Pyrotech is another card that, you know, you have your eye on if they ever release like a low provision artifact that like doesn't do very much or has a deploy effect but is made to be destroyed, something like that, or an artifact with a death wish. Like there's lots of cool stuff you can still build in. But I think that and David Rodriguez Jr. in the chat actually threw something out that was actually fairly important. If Gurnikor is fruit triggers traps, you could just drop a fruit first.
Yeah.
Test for Pitfall, test for Incinerate. But I think it's okay that some of these leaders have interesting matchups against each other because these are matchups we've never seen before. But it's too bad for Eldain here.
Yeah, interesting. That's a good word.
Gurnikor seems like
completely busted. Yeah,
she gets the best. She gets the best. It kind of feels like how Erica's Queen maybe felt, like where everything in the game seemed to be working against her. For Gurnikor, it seems like a lot of stuff in the game's working for her. So we'll see. All right, so 1 minute left in the section and we can talk about the patch. It's okay. There's only 100 changes to talk about. So this is the point in the podcast where I have to ask you guys how much time you have for this cast. I know, Trynet, you've already streamed today. And KingChezz, what does your day look like? Because we're probably going to go over an hour.
I'm completely open. Like I said, I streamed 12 hours last night. I don't intend to do any more streaming today, so I'm all good.
All right, well then let's take a peek at these patch notes. I'm just going to get them loaded up here. But there are a lot of changes. So we're not going to talk about every change, but I think it's worthwhile to talk about many of the changes because these are very important changes. Like I said, a lot of traps were buffed. So Eldain's coming into a better atmosphere than he would have otherwise. And so I'm just loading up these. I just want to make sure that I know exactly what I'm looking at, the key stuff.
Yeah, they buffed Skelligestorm.
They buffed all the weather cards, actually. This is an interesting thing. Like, the weather cards don't really have a home, but they made them a little bit better, so at least we can experiment with the value we could get with these bronze cards.
It's still worse than Lacerate.
Still worse than Lacerate. Yeah. Well, Skelligestorm is. Yes. Yes. In almost every possible situation, yes. At least it's 2 instances of damage. There's that.
Sure.
For a gold card, you'd think it would be a little bit better. But, you know, there is that stuff at least as well. So, I mean, there's a couple things here. Like, Xavier Lemons is now a little bit cheaper. So, I mean, Xavier's nerf was a weird one where they nerfed his ability sort of, but 3 was usually good enough, and then they made him really expensive. But then like Xavier's provision cost here now just means that you have neutral graveyard hate. It's more likely that you're going to have it. It's more likely that you can use it to tech if you need to, but the meta may never really dictate that you would need to run it. But if you wanted to run it, it wouldn't cost you like more than Aguara, which I think was probably fine. But I think 10 to 8 is okay. I think 8 is a really interesting provision point cost because there's a lot of flexibility in that slot for tech. And that's exactly what this is. So before Xavier Lemons was an expensive tech, but he did completely destroy an archetype, anything that could run from the graveyard. So what do you guys think? Do you think Xavier Lemons might see a resurgence, or do you think that Skellige graveyard stuff just isn't really out there anymore? I know Est was really popular, but didn't need the graveyard as much. Well, I mean, did, but with Xavier not in the meta, you didn't worry as much. Xavier might be in the meta now. Do you think Skellige cares? Hot takes?
No.
No? That's fine.
Does any Skellige deck really care about the graveyard?
I think it's more of a monsters hate card, right? For like big
ghouls.
body ghoul things. Yeah. If ghouls ever came back, maybe like a Slizzard deck, you might be able to rack them. Then they're just playing 1 point Slizzards because they don't, at 1 point ghouls because they don't, well, I guess it's not 1 point. They'll still have things to eat, but they won't be eating the big bodies. I don't see it. There's not enough need for it, right? Like full banishment of graveyard is a big deal, right? Because like anything that interacts with the graveyard is instantly useless, right? But like 3 cards, I mean, there's not much that relies on graveyard for just 1 or 2 cards. I don't see it being played, to be honest.
Another one I want to talk about real quick is Geralt Erden. I felt like this card, I don't know, like it seems like the nerf, like Geralt Erden can. Obviously, they were seeing some data on this card. I feel like when I would play it, you know, I would hit it sometimes and I wouldn't hit it sometimes. And when I didn't hit it, at least it was 4. Like, I mean, you can say only so much about a card that is whiffing. You can only say so much about a brick. A brick in Homecoming doesn't feel as bad because the general strength level of the cards is lower. So if you have 4 on the body, you could say, well, at least it was at least worth that much. Like it
was like I drew a bronze instead.
It was like I drew a bronze instead in a matchup where it wasn't helping me. But I mean, I just feel like I don't know. I feel like this is a little harsh, but that could just be me.
So I think Erden was. I think Professional also got a nerf, right? Yeah. And Regis. So I think all 3 of them got a nerf.
Indirectly and directly nerfed. I think Professional.
Yeah. They all got nerfs because the problem with them, right, is that they're auto include. Now, no one of them is auto include, but you're always running at least one of them, right?
I think that's good.
Because like they're just so well started, right? So what they've done is they've put them down because they all just always find value, right? They always get Professionals always a 7. Regis was always going to be decent, right? Like on tactical advantage, it's 11 on tactical advantage. It hits engines and stuff. And Erden, you can just boost yourself, right? If you're taking any damage, which you're going to take, right? You just stack all 1 row, let them hit you, and then you Erden yourself, worst case scenario, right? So I think that they've all come down a little bit, which is obviously a massive buff to monsters. Big Woodland's going to be pretty happy about that. I think that the nerf to Igni was the biggest problem, right? Because Igni's the one where you actually have to work to get that value, and Igni's just not played. There's no point in playing Igni now because you can play the other cards that never whiff.
Was Igni nerfed?
Well, Igni was not this patch. He was nerfed last patch, right? Yeah, so there's like it's just not worth running Igni anymore, right? And this is the first time in Gwent's history Igni's not been like competitively viable, or at least in my time playing Gwent, it's not been competitively viable.
Which is a great time to play Igni because no one sees it.
Yeah.
It's always a good time
like
to play
Igni could whiff, right? The other ones can't, and I think that's why they're taking this nerf, right? Because they all don't really whiff in the way that you said, right? They always find some value. So I think nerfing them's okay. The only problem is that it just means that Woodland just got a lot stronger for no real reason.
Yeah.
Woodland, I think you mean Girnakora.
Yeah, Girnakora, which is the new face of monsters, if you don't know. If you guys want to follow along in the patch notes, I'm just dropping the patch note link in the chat, and of course the patch notes will be in the show. The patch note link will be in the show notes as well. The rest of the neutral changes are usually just strength or provision cost changes. Bronze Weather was buffed in provision cost. A lot of cards that were 6 were reduced to 5, which is important for Geralt Professional, but also important for removal. especially considering that Elzer's Thunder is now a 5-point, well, it always was a 5-point ping, but a little bit more affordable to play if you wanted to actually have the opportunity to actually have a 5 ping, which we talked about as premium.
They didn't change Thunder.
I thought Thunder was brought down from 5.
Nope.
Oh,
not in the patch notes. They
not
didn't go
in the
through
patch notes. They didn't actually do it. Oh, they didn't pull the trigger on that one. So some of the stuff...
They didn't change Assassination either.
Some of the stuff... Oh, they didn't change Assassination either. Okay. So some of the stuff that we talked about in the last podcast, you know, we talked about kind of the leaks that were kind of coming out from the card bot in Discord, and some of the stuff we were seeing in the preview videos, spotlights for the leaders. We were making some assumptions that perhaps we were a little bit quick to make. I'm just looking through here. It just seems like there's just a lot of stuff. I mean, the Ango Yum difference is kind of cool, at least. I mean, it was an unplayable card, really, unless there was a meta that was... I mean, I just don't know. It's random artifact. I mean, it's an interesting card. At least it's a deploy effect, because the fact that card couldn't go off was bad. And then on the other end of it, Regis Hire Vampire, not a great card, but full test gets a 3-point buff if you actually wanted to run it in a boosting world, which could be realistic. So that makes Regis Hire Vampire's low end, like the floor for full test, is very acceptable. The card wasn't bad before, and now full test is just strictly buffed for. And also, of course, anything that gives Zeal, Sumerian Drummer, Pichu's Filters, Vest, whatever you want to run, that really matters. So I think that this is an indirect buff to full test specifically, and a nerf to... and it's also an indirect buff to everything that runs boosts, because you can't just drop Regis Last Say and win the game. So it's an interesting buff / nerf in a way, because it's actually, I mean, it's a huge nerf to the card, obviously, but at least full test can make something out of it.
Would full test really want to play it over something like Gaunter, though, or something like
that's exactly what I was thinking. Would you run it over Gaunter? I mean, it is 2 points cheaper. Yeah, Gaunter is a bit expensive. That is one reason people sometimes were moving away from Gaunter. It's expensive, but Gaunter's like good value in a short range 3. He's one of the best finishes, right? Because he's 6 plus whatever he kills, which is
so reliable too.
Yeah. His 6-point body is just so good. I mean, even if you can't activate him, at least he has a chance to survive as well. Girl Professional still hits him, of course. But I mean, he is really expensive though. Like, there is some full test lists that, you know, I wanted to improve my average value, so I would reduce my top end. Like Selkirk usually does what Gaunter can do. He comes down, he's 6, he removes something at least 6. What is Gaunter doing that Selkirk can't do in like a round 1 specifically, let's say? If you needed to win it or get a huge swing or bleed in round 2, like that's the kind of thing that Northern Realms kind of already had in a way. So I was running Selkirk in that place, and maybe like Akvist is really good, or one of the dragons at least for Ek. And sometimes I would just use it on Blue Stripe Commando. But I think that this is just another option for full test, because he didn't have a ton, but the stuff that he could do was really strong. So it's almost like a card was added to the game for full test to really...
No, I definitely think if Regis is going to be played, it'll be full test. I'm just not sure Regis will be played is the...
Or full test even.
Yeah, or full test for that money. Yeah, well put.
Okay, so let's go kind of lightning round on the factions here. So Unseen Elder gets buffed, unbelievable. Arrakis Cream gets buffed, very believable. That Ozrael gets a little nerf. Striga is buffed, and Ericus Nest Tooltip no longer specifies that drones are 1 power, but they are still. So some of these are just tooltip changes. But the big thing is that Unseen Elder gets a buff, which is great because that leader is really good in the first place, and now he's better. And Ericus Queen gets a buff, which is great because that leader had a lot going against it. I don't know if 3 provisions make or break it, but I mean, 3 provisions doesn't seem like that much. Sometimes I struggle. That 1 point drives me nuts, but 3 points... For a leader that has a lot going against it, especially considering that, you know, Gimpy's around, I don't think the Gimpy nerf changes the fact that you still play him for a 9, right? Like in a worst case scenario, generally. So
no.
He loses a bit of reliability.
Yeah.
Yeah, he becomes quite... Because he's a 6 now, right? He's a 6 for 8. It's a bit of a nerf to 6 for 8.
Did I misunderstand? Gimpy he's a 6 if you hit one thing, yeah.
Yeah. Most people play around it very well at the top levels. Like, you get it on slave infantry and stuff, but most people give you much more than that. I mean, sometimes you get it more, but like normally you're saying. So you say it's like, I think we were averaging it at like 8 right before. It was an 8 for 8 because sometimes you get it, but most of the time you get 7. Yeah. So it's probably now like a 7 for 8 if you're doing it off that maths.
Yeah, I mean, Gimpy's a big card. I think they it's a big nerf. It's a card, but that card was really like seeing a lot of play.
For sure. I think it might see play. So.
Yeah.
It could definitely be a tournament tech too if you're trying to like target something.
100%.
But the stuff I see in Monsters here leads me to believe that they were more or less fine with kind of how Monsters was going. Like Ozrel's very strong, a slight nerf, right? Erica's Queen, slight buff. I mean, Erica's Queen not being played is probably the biggest mark on the faction right now, that they have a leader that is universally seen as the worst, you might say. I don't know if you guys agree. I don't like using terms like that because I feel like every leader has their place, but Erica's Queen at 12 provisions was not seeing a lot of play. And a lot of people in the faction battle were talking about how hard it was to even just get the games won for the quest.
It wasn't that hard.
I mean, I didn't try it because I was playing Northern Realms, which was hard in its own way. But at least, I mean, I didn't feel like as hopeless as some of the people on Reddit were talking about Erica's Queen. Like I got my wins. Like the wins weren't hard to come by. You know,
I had a 40% winner of the Ruckus Queen. I played like 15 games. It was fine.
All right. But I mean, we all agree that this buff doesn't change probably very much of the landscape here.
No, not really.
Yeah.
Not particularly, no.
So let's slide into Skellige then. Now, Bran gets a huge buff here with 3 provision boosts going up to 16, which is pretty good. Bran was probably the least performing leader in Skellige over the last meta. Harold goes down a little bit because he was finding ways to win pretty regularly with that ability of his. Morkvarg's more expensive. Darren is not really a play, like a power play, just a utility play more. It gets a little bit of a nerf here. Restore's provision cost. This is probably a play rate thing. We weren't seeing a lot of Restore. I saw a couple of Erden decks that ran like Veterans and Yada and like had Restore or not Restore in the situations that I saw, but Erden, like a Erden on your side of the board, just to heal up these units that were already damaged. I thought that there might be something there because it seems like a really strong play. Ioana's heal value goes up. That actually makes her a card that 1 to 2 is a huge boost when you're talking about a repeatable effect for sure. I mean, even when we're looking at Gurnakora and Slizzard eating it, like you look at stuff like that, like how you'd rather just take the 2 points a turn than the 1 point a turn on the Thrive, which is kind of what that's all about. Skjal doesn't reach anymore. Okay, Coral's passive ability doesn't trigger when the opponent discards your cards. Okay, that was probably just not intended. And the same thing with Bran. So, again, this seems like this is targeting just the strongest cards in Skellige and just buffing the weakest ones. I mean, that is what balance is. But nothing super exciting comes out of it. Like, I'd say that Ioana is probably the most interesting thing because constant effects at an increased value of 1 is important. Darren obviously seeing a lot of play. Morkvarg seeing play in almost... Like, that discard package is so strong. Scald, Morkvarg... Skirmisher, Burna is just like a really strong combo right now. That package just saw a slight nerf, I guess. In
3 provisions, right?
Provision, but just generally, though, Skellige seems like it's still going to be a sturdy, solid faction to play. Arnyolf notwithstanding.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Changes notwithstanding.
I just want to point out that Bran, it doesn't matter what they do to Bran, he's not going to be played over crack because he's not needed, right? They thin to 0 anyway, right? So his ability's basically meaningless.
It's just passive, and it's just worse than
yeah. So I mean, like the only way it'd be played is if his provisions was more than crack. You'd always, if crack's got more provisions, you're going to run crack because ability's just worth more points, right? So you just run crack over Bran.
It does mean that you can cut Darren though, and still just play Bran instead. You're only losing 1 provision, and now that Darren's nerfed, maybe it's a consideration. Probably not. That's like the only reason why you would.
That is true.
Yeah,
it's
kind
true.
of an indirect way to kind of increase your salary cap, I guess, with Bran. I mean,
Yeah.
what if Bran's ping was 2 instead of 1? It's still
It'd be insane.
Then he'd be played. Yeah. Then he.
That's what we're talking
about. You double his strength, right?
So that's what we're talking about, the 1 to 2.
absolutely monster.
But there's only a limited amount of
monster.
times you can discard, and it is random. It would be insane, though, right? I just wanted to throw it out there. Sometimes I just think about how we can make underplay leaders better, and it's probably just the provision. I mean, the way you propose the Darren change, or the Darren change in like the deck building process. There's still lots to see. I mean, like we said, the patch just hit a couple hours ago. It's not the first time we've done a podcast where the host has not even played a game in the patch that was released in the morning that he did the podcast. So, there's still a lot of speculation on my part, but you guys are keeping me in line. Northern Realms. Hey, now this is kind of cool. Vandergrift and Vandergrift's Blade get buffed. I mean, hey, this is just, it's fun for the people who want to do the brews. You come into...
I don't even know what those cards do.
Is Vandergrift a soldier yet?
Vandergrift is he? I'm not in the
No,
I couldn't tell you.
He's a knight. He doesn't even get buffed by his sword.
He doesn't even get buffed by his own sword. Well, you play the sword. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. Like if they had an interaction where you play the two together, but I mean, this is more for like the people who want to like try it out. Like the thing about Bronze Weather is that if you know anything about the game and how you should want your cards to be valued, the Bronze Weather just, even if you wanted to try it out, it just felt bad. You do it on stream, everybody in the stream's asking you like, lol, why are you playing these cards? Why would you do this? And you just lose your games or whatever. So to make these cards more attractive to actually fit into a deck, I like that. And I'll try it. And if it works, it works. But Vandergrift, yeah, Vandergrift's Blade, if it's on the board, your soldiers get buffed by 1 on that row whenever they're played. So that's good. And Vandergrift deals 1 damage every turn. But if the Blade is on the board, he deals 2 damage every turn. I believe that's how it works. I forget I think he's 5. Just again, off the top of my head, I just don't have the
it sounds right.
I haven't played a Vandergrift deck lately. So there is that. Field Medic provision cost being changed is pretty good because Northern Realms did not have a lot of good deploy abilities, and Field Medic was one of those cards, but she was expensive. So she's nerfed in power, but buffed in provision cost. So if you just want to make sure that you have more boosts available, I think that this is a considerable inclusion at 5. If you're running a boost strategy, you're running the Lyrian Scytheman, perhaps more stuff for the Tridem infantry to work on. I every now and then tried to fit in Field Medic in. It's a human as well if you care about Drog decks. So there's that too. And I think that it was just really hard to justify the 6 provision cost when I want to play Blue Stripe Commandos. And, you know, they made a similar change to Trebuchet, a great card that was too expensive. And then it's now a fine card at 5. It gets you value. This card, I think, is going to be the same thing with the synergy. And then the Trebuchet, hold on a second here. The Trebuchet's order ability will now damage 3 adjacent units by 1, as opposed to the condition.
Yeah, they had to kill the middle unit for.
That's a big buff. I love that change. Especially with Gurnakora being around, dropping a 1-point unit here and there. Maybe you open up Gurnakora Necker. Trebuchet comes out. I don't know. But I do believe that the Trebuchet was really held back by that ability because Erika's Venom is a very reasonable card to play, but sometimes it's just really, really annoying if you can't get that kill. And that was a kill at 3 condition. So the Trebuchet...
It's the only bronze gets 3 points per charge, too.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Now we start looking at siege support. And I was already looking at siege support because I was looking at what a buffed ballista or reinforced ballista could really, really do. Reinforced ballista buffs up at 4. 2 damage per charge makes the siege support pretty nutty. But then you look at Ballista, which is a 4 strength card with the buff that Meve could provide it, let's say. Now it's a 5-point card. KingChezz, you were talking about how 5 is just safe usually. So now at least, the ping is worse, but the reliability of that unit staying on the board is much, much higher. So siege supports maybe see extra value there, but really you want to play it on the Trebuchet now, or reinforced ballista or full test pride. But I think that buff to Trebuchet, that's a sleeper buff. I didn't see this coming. That's a good buff. I think this is the first time I'm reading it. I like it a lot. It's a 3 strength unit and it's 5 provisions. The Trebuchet.
Yeah, I think so. Might be 6.
I mean, I think it's 5. I don't think it's 6 because I think the only 6 provision.
If it's 5 and it can get 6 value, it's pretty good. It's decent.
Good. That's a good card. Northern Realms got a huge buff there. I think it's just like little things, right? Little things. You make a unit that much better. You have 2 of them. You're squeezing out that value. It's interesting. I like this change to Northern Realms. I'm gonna definitely play Trebuchet now. Absolutely. Scoia'tael we're gonna move on to Scoia'tael though. So Shearer is a big one. Shearer destroys himself with the units with the same power. So he is kind of being played as a unit that is a spell. So of course Scoia'tael can do lots of stuff with drawing Shearer from the deck as an elf, pulling Shearer out of the deck, of course, or buffing Shearer in hand because he is not a spell, he is a unit. But he will die when he uses his ability, which makes him worse at his top end value, which was ridiculous. If he could remove 2 6s or 2 7s, it was just like unfair, especially when you have like ultimate control over the board and last say. It just feels miserable to know that it's coming. So at least now he's not going to get 14 to 16 points in value, which is very fair, and CDPR knows that as well, so they made him cheaper to include in the deck. Generally, though, Shearer still being played. What do you guys think? Trynet, what do you think?
Probably.
Probably?
There's nothing else to do in Scoia'tael, so yeah, I guess.
I mean, I honestly... So the thing with the the change to Shiru, right, is that he's a board wipe card, right? So he's still just gonna utterly destroy Skellige. Like Skellige's still they're just gonna cry every time they queue into ST and Shiru's there because they just run so many fours, right? So you like Shiru was hitting for 20-24 value against Skellige quite often if they unless they crack pinging themselves, right? And then you're winning anyway because they crack pinging themselves. So, like, Shiru's still going to be really good in that scenario. However, he's a lot worse against monsters, right? For example, because you'd buff him up to 8, you'd give him the Ithlin buff, and then you'd move him, and then you could burn all their 10s and stuff. That's obviously not going to be any good. Can't deal with Sabbath now because that just trades even. It's not a good trade, really. So it is a big. There are nerfs to it, but the fact that it's 2 extra provisions would be good if it wasn't for the fact that it's Scoia'tael, and Scoia'tael has nothing to do with those 2 free provisions. Like, what are you going to do? Run some more bad cards? Like, it's, I mean, like, so it's not like it doesn't really do much for him. So it is a bit of a nerf, but I still think Shiru's going to be auto-include most likely.
I mean, it's a big one, right? We're talking about Scoia'tael. We're talking about a card that a lot of people thought in the last meta was carrying the faction. Shiru was living in a cathedral. You couldn't even see the ceiling on this card, and now at least it's reasonable. I think that's the thing. I think Scoia'tael players and fans feel maybe personally attacked here, but it's just the card was out of control. Polly Dahlberg is more affordable but worse. Zoltan Chivet is also slightly worse because he doesn't count himself, but also reduced in provision cost. Let's see here. Incinerating Trap buffed to just make it more easier to include in a deck because it was way too expensive at 6. I don't know if it'll see play at 5, but it is a 5 for 5, kind of, sort of, if you want to stretch it there.
No, it's not.
Not really. No, it's not. Because you can play around it, obviously, all the time. But there is the nature of traps that forces your opponent to play suboptimally. So, again, we've talked enough about traps and how Trynet does not believe in traps at all. I'm not saying I do or don't. I'm just saying that the discussion can be had, perhaps. Yorvith Gambit is, like we said in the last podcast with Pumpkin, Yorvith Gambit, he doesn't think it's a great card because it means you have to run 4 traps, and it means you're probably running Pitfall Trap, and you can't run Pitfall Trap and Incinerating Trap at the same time because they cancel each other. Well, one procs, but the other one doesn't. And I don't know if this is enough of a buff for it, but it does pull 2 cards out of your deck. It's the interaction with Pitfall and Incinerating Trap is always going to be something to consider because that means you just can't play one of those cards. You can play.
It's a great card to play in round 1. It's like Darren. It pulls 2 bad cards out of your deck.
Yeah, so there is that. But then you're playing trap deck.
You're paying 13 provisions for it, right? It's like, yeah.
Huh. It's the Scoia'tael tax.
Yeah, it's the Scoia'tael tax. So Darren, which is not 13 provisions at all, and has a body, but at least you get the value from the traps. Mahakam Horn was reduced, and Crushing Trap triggers sooner. So I mean, I think time will tell. Traps were never good, but they were never. I mean, traps were never competitive. But they weren't really given a chance to be. At least they're given a chance for some discovery. And I know that there's going to be a lot of people that want to play this way because I know a lot of people that in traps were over time in Vintage Gwent changed over and over again because they couldn't find the balance on it. You could buff cards that would flip over at the end of the game. You could get kind of a last say on that even if you didn't have it before. Hand buff made traps very scary. Mahakam Horn, Teruvial, Mahakam Horn of the past, the Teruvial buff was really hard to play around sometimes. And just generally traps got to the point where you just didn't see them anymore. And traps weren't part of the game anymore. And when you talk about people that have the departure from Vintage Gwent to Homecoming, a lot of the stuff that turned people off about Homecoming was the removal of things in the game. So the traps were added back into the game, although they weren't very good. This at least fleshes it out, and people that come back to the game can see that traps have a place in the game rather than kind of like feeling like they're getting sweat out of the game. So I feel like this is definitely a move towards a mechanic that people want to have in the game, and it's scary. You don't want to make it too good because traps can be frustrating to play against, kind of like Secrets in Hearthstone. It's sort of the same thing. It's just you're not really sure what's going to happen, but you have a good idea that it's bad, right? And if you can make them better, you make the deck better. You make the faction better because you have more options. And Francesca is still an option that is different from the rest of the leaders as well. So Scoia'tael does at least have some level of diversity competitively. I think that time will have to tell if they actually have that. Any parting shots on Scoia'tael before we move into Nilfgaard, which is the last faction we're going to talk about for the patch notes?
Yeah, the timer change on Crushing Trap is actually kind of a big deal. Just the way the timing works now. So now if you play Crushing Trap and your opponent passes in response, you can just pass back and the Crushing Trap flips over. Mm-hmm. So it's like you just played a last rate in terms of tempo. It's no longer tempo negative.
Yeah, 2 turns is a deceiving thing. 2 turns is not really 2 turns in a lot of ways. Like you look at Villain Trettenmirth, it's the same kind of thing. He has a 2-turn timer, but it's your opponent has 1 turn to react to it. It's at the end of your turn. So that is true. So Crushing Trap, Villain Trettenmirth, a lot of people maybe don't know that about Villain Trettenmirth because it's a very, very underplayed card. In fact, the only time I ever saw it on the board is when I played it. So there is that. So a 2-turn trigger is deceptively quite good because of the way passing works, just like how engines are good. So Nilfgaard, both of you, would you say that Nilfgaard is your favorite faction? I know King, you would say that. Trynet, would you say that?
I don't really have a favorite faction.
That's fair.
I just play whatever's good.
Yeah. That sounds like a spiky thing to say. That seems like...
So probably Nilfgaard then, right? Because it's always good.
So probably Nilfgaard.
Skellige.
Skellige's good too, yeah. So you're never going to play Northern Realms in the near future, I guess. So we won't have too much to talk about. So let's talk about Nilfgaard's change. So Emir, 2 provision, nerf. So this feels like this is a target. Okay, I guess just hot takes, you guys. How did you feel about the power level of Nilfgaard Shoop? It was rated tier 1 by a lot of players. Did you guys think Nilfgaard Shoop needed this kind of targeted nerf? Like this was
questionably better as a Morvaran deck.
Yeah, I was just about to say I don't think Nilfgaard Shoop got a nerf because I'm pretty sure everyone switched to Morvaran Shoop at the end anyway.
Now that I didn't know.
Like Emir and Shoop was played before the Morvaran buff, and then was played up until people started to realize that the provisions is just worth it, right? You just run it. But then people decided not to run Shoop in Morvaran because you can run better things, right? So, but if you were going to run Shoop, you were going to run probably Morvaran. Although, it does have the ability to bounce, which is nice. The double Shoop was nice, so some people were still playing it, but it had mainly fallen out of the meta at the very top of ladder.
It made the deck really high rolly. I'm glad nobody's going to be doing it anymore.
Yeah, that's the thing. You're saying like Nilfgaard Shoop was just better with Morvaran, but then Morvaran was just better without Shoop. So it's just like the deck is just worse than what Morvaran can do.
I don't know if I agree with that one. I think Morvaran Shoop is a very good deck.
Okay. Yeah, but the bounciness, I think that it was bouncing Shoop. Shoop is very clearly doomed. So they didn't really want, they don't let Francesca replay it. So why would they let Emir replay it? But they do. But instead of changing Shoop, they hit Emir here. And now Emir has a strong ability, an ability that will always, always, always matter. Bouncing a card is an ability that was in Vintage Gwent. Everybody could do it with Decoy. Now only Nilfgaard can do it. Monsters can do it with Whispering Hillock. And I guess playing stuff out of the grave. There's not really a lot of ways you can bounce, really. So it's a really strong ability. I kind of wish it was I loved bouncing cards, playing cards twice. It opens up a lot of, it does 2 things, right? It opens up a lot of possibilities, but it also makes cards very scary to design because if you're always worried about a card being played twice, just being super bad in a 3-round game, you hopefully you don't have to worry too much about how strong a card can be one time you play it. But in a decisive round, playing Shoop twice was just really hard to deal with. Letho changed completely, is now a 5-point lock unit that gives you an additional redraw if you play him on the range row. Seems not very good when you have better locks to run, and do you need so many locks that you need to include another faction lock or another Witcher specifically? But Ox is already a Witcher, so if you were playing Witcher Nilfgaard, you were already playing Ox at a higher value for a lock effect. Letho just seems like he's just not very good. What do you guys think? Yeah? Kind of like the...
I think that's a fair assessment.
Seems like they had an option to give him something better when they were redesigning him in a world where redraw is being destroyed completely. Wasn't really, maybe never a direction they should have taken. But
he could do both abilities and he'd be interesting. But the fact that he only does one is just kind of lame.
Yeah, I think that's it. Getting one additional redraw. You always want to have your good cards, right? It's not that one additional chance. It could be. Imagine it was Vintage Taller where you could do the redraw right away. Would that make it more interesting or better? You could actually just swap the card when you played it. That ability's gone in the game. You can't, unless I'm forgetting a card.
Novice does
that ability is no longer in the game anymore. So I think it would have been okay maybe to experiment with Letho doing that here, but it seems like they just wanted to keep him redraw related. But the lock, I got to say, I love a lot of the changes, and I know that there's a lot of thought put into a lot of these changes, but I feel like I got to say that the Locka unit on Letho's ability feels a little taped on. It doesn't feel like it's Letho is put in a place. He's not put in an archetype. He's not even put in a Witcher deck for Nilfgaard necessarily, because the Witchers that you could run already were better. You have to kind of fight for a good slot for the Witchers. You're running Eskel, you got Evo, you've got Ox and Seret in Nilfgaard, you have Bronze Witchers as well. So I don't know. I feel like Letho was not done. He wasn't for a character of this gravity. I mean, Kingslayer of course has his place, but for a character of this kind of significance, I feel like Letho just, he's this big dude who's coming for you, right? It's just, he's so iconic of a character. I love Witcher 2. Maybe that's just me. Nilfgaardian Knight no longer destroys self if there's no units left for no enemy units for it to boost. That's cool. That makes the card much more interesting, I think, in both directions, because you don't have to play a deck that cares about your opponent's boost necessarily. You could just play this proactively on turn 1 if you have the ability to do it. And it's just a strong body for reveal if you want to win the reveal jousts or clashes. So I think that this is a fine buff to this card. It wasn't seeing any play at all, even in decks that cared about boost, or was it?
It started seeing a little bit of play because it enables your Leo, and you can buff like the tallest unit and reset it with Peter.
Yeah, of course, right. Yeah, Geralt of Rivia and Leo whiffing is miserable, but yeah, having Nilfgaardian Knight definitely helps it there. Yeah, I like it.
It's a slight buff, right? It's a slight buff. I don't see it being massively impactful, but because you're still probably going to be using it to enable Leo if you want to be playing it, or doing it in some cheese tactic with here if that's the way you want to play. But I mean, it is a slight buff, right? Because now you can at least play it on a dry pass if you don't need it or whatever, things like that, right? Like it is a buff for sure.
It's one of the only cards in the game that's actually good going first. Like better going first than going second.
Yeah. It's just like a bad Marauder, right? Like it's
it's a reverse Marauder.
You could say that every
a reverse Marauder that's more expensive.
You could say every Orders card is technically better going first because you can act on it. Your opponent has to deal with it. Your opponent is put in a position to answer. So any card that has an effect on the following turn, you could say, and there are a lot of those cards, but it's not. Trynet looking around like
not in the same way.
That's fair. Throw it at me.
Yeah.
I mean, the one positive to playing an Orders card or whatever, right, is if they can remove it, they're going to remove it whenever you play it. But the one advantage to playing it turn 1 is that you stop them from playing an engine, so you do get 1 point, I guess, in that scenario. That is the one upside to playing an Order card first.
Yeah. And there are other order cards. So Imperial Enforcers actually nerfed here. Imperial Enforcers. The thing is, the Imperial Enforcers weren't bad. It's just that the archetype that they were supposed to support seemed to be non-existent. So it seems weird that the Spy archetype actually takes a nerf to their engine, which is a good engine because it was at 4, right? It was a 2-ping that was at 4. That's definitely nothing to sleep on, regardless if you're playing like a full Spy build or trying to just resurrect Spy Nilfgaard. So I get it. I mean, that's probably just what it was, right? The ping was very strong. The body was hard to remove. Yeah. You were going to get value. I played against a lot of Morvan. Like, you just use Morvan to buff it right away, and you just play another one, buff it. It's just really hard to deal with. So
this is great for all those people who are trying to meme around with Ardal and Operator. Tactics in your deck.
Yeah, right. Oh, Operator would still be good for this card as well. Operator is a card I don't see a lot of experimentation with, but you used to see it with Bears, the Savage Bear, and sometimes you see it with Blue Stripe Commando, but it's, he's expensive, right? So
he's a 10, right?
Yeah, but he's a beast. That beast synergy, monsters. Raw Toss or big nerf here, going up to 7. This card basically won you or any round where you could, if your opponent passed on you, because you could just destroy whatever you wanted on the board. It was super good, and it is still good, but it's more expensive now. But reasonably, you still would maybe run one of these. The card's power is, undeniable. At least there's counterplay to it. So you don't see truce here. Now, this is actually an interesting question. Last podcast, we had Ryshik. If you know Ryshik from CDPR, he's one of the designers on the team. He asked us how we felt about truce as a keyword, where your opponent cannot activate an ability or an ability would not trigger whatsoever if the opponent had already passed. And this is probably the big example. This and, what's her name? Isbell were the big examples of cards that could probably be made better without actually just like nerfing it provision cost or nerfing its ability by giving it the truce mechanic. Do you think that the truce mechanic, assuming that, I mean, I don't assume the truce was, if they were thinking about adding it to the game, it probably isn't ready yet, but if they were just thinking about it like last week. So I think that, would you rather have seen Rotosser go truce, or do you think that this change is also fine, or do you think that this change isn't enough? I'll throw it out there to Trynet first, or King, you hit me first.
So I want to see Truce back. Like I do want to see Truce back, right? Isabel's just stupid. The fact that if you have Lasse, they literally have to hold something at the end to counter it. If you get double Lasse, they can't counter it. And then you can do stupid stuff like I was doing with my card advantage deck, right? You can copy it with Letho Kingslayer, and then you've got like triple Lasse, and you just yeah, and it's just really, really like it's just not fun, right? It's not fun to play against when you've passed and there's nothing you can do when this thing comes down. So I think Truce would be nice on that. I think a lot of people are calling for Truce on it. Rock Tosser obviously needs Truce because then like it's like you said, you can if you're on red coin and you draw it round one, you can almost always catch up. I mean, unless they super overcommit, you can always pretty much catch up because you've always got the TA target to kill. So like I'm not sure what would be a bigger nerf to it though, the 2 provisions or Truce, because I think either one's pretty big, right? Like at 7 provisions it's kind of hard to fit it in, and with Truce it's very hard to run it because it's so easily dealt with. I think the card
like
I think it's 7 provisions.
Yeah, as long as you can consume, remove, ping your unit. Or place a weak unit next to it. Like during the round, it didn't feel that oppressive, but end round, that's the thing, right? Same with Isbell.
Yeah.
Like Isbell not seeing any changes or anything here is too bad because that's the kind of effect that is the last thing that you would want to be able to occur after your opponent passes. And I think that in a game where passing is a core part of the game, we should have more cards that care about passing. Everybody passes every game. So why should we not? That's a lot of territory to explore. So I hope they bring Truce back. If they do bring Truce back, maybe Rot Tosser is fine at 5. We would have to see. But I don't think that they would bring Truce back and immediately buff Rot Tosser back. It would, if we ever see Rot Tosser come back at 5, it's going to be a long time from now, I think. Magni Division's power change from 3 to 2. Thank you. False Series power change from 4 to 5. Didn't play it. Don't know if we will. But it's just, making underplayed cards better. Cynthia's buffed and Treyarch is nerfed. So Treyarch is a big card. I hate this card. Like, this card is just a brutal card. I think at every level of play, this card just frustrates the hell out of you. It doesn't matter where. It doesn't matter if you're rank 0, rank 25. This card takes a card out of your deck, and especially after you've thinned. You play Witchers, they play a couple Viper Witchers just to piss you off already, and then they drop Treyarch on you, and all that's in there are the good cards now. Like, just, it always happens, right? Confirmation bias, whatever you want. But, they take your round 3 win condition out, or it's just so annoying. So
I've got a funny story about Treyarch. Last night I was playing Pro Neo on stream, and we got to round 3 and he was playing Menno Horn, right? Morvan Horn list. And he horned me round 1, so I knew he had Menno, right? I knew he's just going to Azir his horn back and Menno me in round 3, right? So I held on to my Treyarch, and as soon as he played Azir, I just played Treyarch and played a 19-point Treyarch and discarded his horn. Oh, it was amazing. But like, the card is just ridiculous. Why am I playing a 19.6 provision card? It's just like, it's stupid. I think it's the most rage-inducing card I've ever seen in Gwent. And I mean, 1 provision nerf, I mean, it's a nerf, right? But I don't think it's enough. I think they should have put it to 10 and just got rid of the card, right? Like, the card's just so rage-inducing, and it's not fun. No skill involved, no kind of play.
Yeah, I think the issue with the card is more that people don't like to play against it, more than that it's necessarily like way over the top good. It's just such an unfun card to deal with that they just have to change it.
Yeah, it's just so swingy, right? Like, if you're playing, for example, like that, right? I hit the horn, that's 19. But if you're playing a Lippy deck, I hit Lippy, it's game over, right? If I if you hit Shiru before, right, it's just game over. They no longer have a Shiru.
Yes.
Like, it's just so swingy, the fact that it can just discard something so important.
Yeah. Playing a little Renew Draug, they get Draug or Renew, or they get, or I'm playing Sabrina's a huge win con for me. They get Sabrina. That's the worst part because you can't Blue Dream it that way. I don't know. It's just, at least, at least CDPR is consistent. They made Nilfgaard one of their archetypes not fun, right? They got Usurper. You have all the locks. You have Treyarch. You have the RNG on reveal you have the joust mechanic that people have not really liked all that much. Basically everything that is in the game that's not fun is in Nilfgaard. So we can say safely that Nilfgaard's main archetype is not being fun. At least it's all in one faction, right? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I just think that Treyarch was definitely, I mean, when you look at some of the nerfs here, like some of these nerfs you could qualify as aggressive. This is not aggressive. It's not aggressive enough, really. The fact that he was 6 in the first place was already pretty astonishing. And like, I'd be fine if they just changed Viper Witcher completely and gave Treyarch's ability like a gold card, the gold card ability, the Viper Witcher ability. So he only have like 1 chance to screw your opponent, not 3 chances. And I mean, we're not talking about, again, it's not about really competitiveness. It's about how it feels to play against. And that feels bad. And like, but I mean, I guess it feels pretty good if you're the Treyarch player. So it's not what is known as anti-fun. Anti-fun is you're indifferent if you're playing it and your opponent hates their life. That's true anti-fun. At least the Treyarch player is like, score, jackpot. Anyway, there's a lot.
It feels good to hit a Shiru.
Yeah, it feels good. Feels good to hit Shiru and then get the concede. So there are a lot of changes in this patch. We touched upon very few of them relatively, and there are a number of gameplay fixes and tweaks, bug fixes, quality of life improvements, I imagine, speed of game improvements, lots of just great stuff. They say numerous fixes, typos, everything. You got a ton of fixes. It feels like an old school Gwent patch. There are enough changes here that I do not know what tomorrow or today will bring when I play.
Did they fix the name bug? Where I can't see names anymore. Is that in the patch notes?
Do not know. I actually didn't get a chance to read through all of these. Like a lot of these patch notes I read for the first time, like the Nilfgaardian Knight change, the Trebuchet change. Like I had no idea that was changing. So there are a lot of these things that I really haven't given a lot of thought of. And the game fixes list is long enough that I just don't have time to glance at it during the podcast. But I would say that this was a pretty thorough covering of what we might see in the future based on these changes, or at least what we think about these changes. But there are a lot here. You guys, if you have any changes you wanted to talk about that we skipped over, if you've had a chance to really pour through these patch notes, throw it at me. Otherwise, we'll take it to the chat and see if they have any questions for the King and the Wild Hut champion here.
The only thing I'd want to touch on is the fact that, like, I feel like Magni Division and Enforcer, and I think there was one other, was nerfed a point rather than a provision. I think if you had nerfed Magni a provision, it would have been a better nerf, because like the whole point of Magni, right, is that it's a 4-point engine that can be removed. Like it's harder to be removed, right? And the same with Enforcer, right? But now if you improve their provision cost, it's still a nerf, right? But they still have the benefit of the fact that the reason you play them is that they're hard to remove. Right, so I would have preferred it to go the other way. I think that they've done a lot of point nerfs as opposed to provision nerfs, which I might have preferred. But I think overall, like, I think it's a really interesting patch though. I'm surprised. I think Monsters got off like this though. I will point that out. I think Monsters got off basically scot-free. How Arachnospore is still a 5 for 4, I have no idea. I mean. There you go.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting. I think that Magni, like, would we still be fine with a 6 provision bronze card being like a must-remove 4-point card that can be buffed by Morvran? I think that in Magni's situation, the points were the thing. Like, the fact that he was at 4, you even said it yourself, the fact that he came down at 4, no matter what deck you're playing, no matter what's going on, and you can protect it if you're playing the best leader, which is Morvran, I think that that's probably.
But the problem with doing it the other way, right, is that we've already got this situation where there's a bunch of bronze cards we don't want to play. You're now giving us another bronze card that we put in our deck that we don't want to play anymore, right? Whereas if you do it the other way, I'm more inclined to still want to play my bronze cards, right? Whereas if you're nerfing it the point way, well, this is just another bronze card I put in my deck just as filler, and I don't want to see it anymore, right? So I think they need to buff bronze cards. I think is the main thing I would want to see in the next patch, right? I want to see bronze cards become more playable.
Yeah. Where you say you want to see like the nerf by a provision instead of a point, I kind of take the opposite approach. I'd like to see more cards buffed up to the power level of Arachnospore and Magna Division. I would love to want to play my bronzes, but I just don't, because they suck.
The floor is really kind of it's shaky. I mean, this is core set situation. Expansions fix most of these problems. Maybe it's okay that there's only like 1 or 2 really good 4-drops in any given faction, and Wolfpack, and then you have to make some tough decisions, and then when an expansion comes, like the problem is like an expansion, eventually there's going to be power creep on the 4 provision slot. I think eventually you're just going to play the best things there, because that's going to be the slot where you need to get the most value, or you just don't want to play those cards. So I think that the floor is really weird. You have cards that just seem like absolutely god awful at 4, and you have cards that actually feel like they could get gold value at 4 sometimes, you know, in the right situations. Engine specifically, obviously there's counterplay for all of these cards, so you know, it depends on the matchup specifically, but the floor for some factions seemed really good for Nilfgaard. You get Nausicaa Brigade, you get Magna Division, and was well, the recruit was 4 at one point, and they got nerfed, but the recruit was basically 6 or 4 in most situations. Like, Nilfgaard's always had really good low provision cost unit, low recruit cost unit. So I think that I feel like Nilfgaard was brought more in line with the options available at 4 in this situation. You really feel it when you make a shoop deck. You realize how bad the 4s and 5s can be when you have to include like another whole set of bronzes. So you really feel it in the shoop deck specifically, but I think that it's fine. Nilfgaard had just really good stuff at 4. I think that's how I feel about that.
Yeah, it just would have been nice to see buffs instead of nerfs.
As you know, it usually is when we're talking about cards that are not as game breaking as Sheer, let's say. You want to have fun options, right? You want to have there's a safety to some of these changes, I think. Although Treyarn, too safe for Treyarn, personally. Probably, I think Treyarn and Letho are probably like my X's on this list of mostly check marks. I think that those ones were kind of not great for me. If you have any questions for the King or for Trynet, let me know in the chat. Tag me at McBearded. We're going to jump into the community section, see if you guys have any questions for these top-ranked pro ladder players and very frequent streamers as well. These guys know all there is to know. They know what the community thinks as well, because they get to read the chat constantly. Every single day they play hours and hours of this game. So these are great players to ask questions if you're trying to build a new deck, you're trying to see where things are going to go in this meta. I think that these are great brains to pick. So let's see what you guys have to say. Tag me up, and we'll see you after this short break. Once again, we are supported by our Commandos. Patrons at patreon.com/CommandersHorn. Thanks so much for keeping the lights on, keeping the podcast going, and of course, being a supporter of me on any platform you can have. I just thank you profusely. I just want to say that one more time. I feel like I don't say it enough, but sometimes I feel like I say it too much. Really, I mean, I think this can probably be extended to the 2 streamers we have. Our communities make us. It's really, really important. It's really important to the game. We love this game. We want to see it grow. Thanks so much for sticking around. Thanks so much for watching the podcast. We got some questions coming in hot already. Flawless 1C asking thoughts to fixes on speeding up the game. Now, I actually can't comment on this because I haven't played a game yet. I woke up, got breakfast, got things prepared for the podcast, and started my stream. So I actually have not been in game yet, so I can't comment on that. But gentlemen, how do you feel about the game flow right now? Throw it out there to King first.
Well, I only played one game so far since the patch, and it seemed faster. It's hard to tell. I only played one game, but and I wasn't really paying attention. So, but yeah, it seemed fine. I definitely think that I think you now draw you only draw at the same time, right? Yeah. It's quicker, yeah. So it's a bit quicker like that. Yeah. I mean, speeding the game up is definitely an improvement, right?
Fair enough. Yeah,
it's a great change. It's one of the most important things they have to do going forward. I mean, it's not. I don't think it's done yet, but it's definitely an upgrade
because it's a cumulative effect. Like every second you save on a game is hours you save on a grind of a season. It's tons of minutes you save in a tournament cast. Like these are like Gwent is a game. It takes a long time to play Gwent games. It's just how it is, to the point where I actually feel like maybe tournament formats might be okay as best of 3s in general, just for time wise. But I mean, you get to see less of the game. Maybe the finals best of 5. We're going to see Gwent Masters come back, and I don't know if we're going to see any tweaks to any of these systems. I think best of 5 Conquest is, with all the changes that have come to the game, I think that's probably one they probably won't tweak, just because the whole season has been like that. But of course, the whole pro season of all the opens and challengers has seen every permutation of Gwent, basically. So it's already pretty weird to see how champions are coming back to a different game completely. But at least if the game is smooth, fast, drag and drop maybe in the future, that kind of stuff. I think everybody, no one will ever. Yeah, you want that back, right? Try that drag and drop.
It bothers me that it's not in the game.
Yeah, I miss it a little bit. Some of the cursor stuff, some of the arrow clicks, and like having to right click off things, and you select a card, now you have to place it, but you want to get off, you have to right click off of it. It's just, yeah, it's all, but it's coming though. Jason Slama made, I was going to say Slama 2 Flags, but Jason Slama, director of the game right now, is the guy that has kind of gave us hope that changes are coming when they're ready, and they're going to be coming. Like there will be quality of life improvement patches, and there should be another one in February. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe in the live cast they did say this last week. And if I don't take that as official, if that is just a mistake or an error what I'm saying, but I believe he said that there are more tweaks coming in February just for quality of life and gameplay. Jamoni's asking, here's one for all of you. What keywords would you want back in the expansion? This one is easy for me because I think that this keyword has way more legs with the new leader system, and that is orders or loyalty or anything that triggers on a leader being used. We have a lot of leaders that have multiple charges or cooldowns that can be used throughout the entire game. I think that in a previous vintage Gwent, we had orders, which meant that you play your leader, and you had the Imperial Golems coming out, you had Sasuke coming out. The orders units didn't really feel very good when you had a one-use leader. When you have a multiple-use leader, now it seems like maybe it could be okay. You add value to your leader play. You have like a secondary engine sort of source and points. And it's really scary with a leader like me. If you add order charge to the game, you have me, if you have Croc, you have Demavend. Especially Demavend, whose ability can just completely whiff if you use it on an untriggered orders card or something like that. Like Demavend probably would benefit the most from it, and I think that a leader with an ongoing ability that has sometimes struggling to get the value from it really needs it. So orders by far for me. Guys, if you've had some time to think about it, what do you guys think? Truce we already talked about, so you can't use that one.
Damn.
Sorry. Anybody who has one on their minds can throw it out there.
How about strengthen? It's a bit of a controversial one, right? People don't like it's. It adds some it's a lot of long-term investment, right? Strengthens like carryover. Basically, it's another form of carryover. And like I quite like that. I quite like the strength. It is abusable. Like there were things that you can do that gets quite. You can get cheese tactics and stuff, or you just end up getting like great swords come back, right? And that's pretty strong. But I mean, strengthen. I like carryover, right? I like playing for future investment and stuff, and I think strengthen was a good way of doing that. So there we go, strengthen.
Yeah,
that's a good answer. I'll go with that one too.
Yeah,
I like strengthen.
I mean, it was
I like carryover effects in general.
It was a
great
great
axe to fight over.
Yeah, it was a great ability, but it was very abusable, right? It was just really scary when you brought that card back at strength level. So either two things. One faction gets strengthened, and that faction is balanced around that, graveyard-wise. Like, it was super abusable because you could bring everything back from the graveyard. You could tutor everything. You could, you protect everything. It was just nuts. Strengthen could get so much value. In a world now where like it's just a little bit different now, like cards are smaller, the way you protect them is different, and you could use strengthen. Perhaps there is a reason to strengthen while everything being regressing still. Regressing was an old keyword where a strengthen unit would reverse to base value in the graveyard. So the strengthening effect, well, those were no longer carryover plays really, because they went to the graveyard and they reset. So if there was some sort of if there was some sort of highest base value on the board ability, or in a faction that could maybe not need regressing to be balanced. Skellige right now, I think with Resurrection wouldn't be the faction, but if they added a new faction with Strengthen, maybe they could balance around it. I don't know. Forward Gwent, what would you bring? Oh, sorry, Sushant 2010. What leader out of the 5 are you most excited to try out? We kind of talked about this at the beginning. I'm going to try me first because I just want to see if this is a leader that can push Northern Realms a little bit further because they weren't going that far. So I just want to know if that's true or not. And some people have sent me some spicy lists already, so I'm going to be cracking those in. I will be shutting down the stream to get the podcast up, but I will be streaming later today a little bit to try out Meve for sure. You guys have already played Trynet. You used to think that Gurnikor is so much fun you didn't want to try anything else.
I think Gurnikor is great. Yeah. I'm probably going to play it some more tomorrow. Maybe we'll play some Meve. Maybe we'll play some the Skellige one. Yeah. But mostly just Gurnikor. Yeah.
King, is there one that you are excited to try it first?
I probably no. I probably won't end up playing any of them. I don't think any of them are going to be super competitive. Maybe Gurnikor or maybe Meve, but Meve's NR, so I'm a bit of a meta slave, right? I only want to play strong stuff, so I probably won't play any of them.
Yeah, I mean, the way you described your streaming is kind of like the way I do it. It's like, yeah, I want to meme around, but I just don't want to lose constantly. So yeah. I guess we got to play something good, that kind of thing. Forward Gwent, what would you do to bring dwarves back into the meta? So far, ST is the only real control option. Well, it's kind of two questions, isn't it? I mean, dwarves don't have to be control. Or sorry, you're saying that there's only control for Scoia'tael, and dwarves don't help that. Well, I mean Scoia'tael being a control heavy faction, or a faction that has the best use of control, is not that bad. I mean, in a lot of games, certain classes or certain colors or certain factions just do one thing better than the other. So Scoia'tael being more of a control faction is fine with me. Dwarves being in the meta, I mean, dwarves have their place. They're just not seen that very much. So I mean, the easy answer is buff them, right? The easier answer is buff them or give them more synergy, which is a problem that any problem that can be solved by new cards are good problems. Well, not great problems. They're good problems. Problems that can only be solved by patches are the problems that you don't want to have, because those are the ones that usually feel far more urgent than just making dwarves better or making Ardal better with more tactics cards or whatever. So I think that, give more cards for synergy, buff some of them, give a leader that cares more about dwarves or cares about archetypes at all. Like a leader that cares about any tribal, or like a specific tribal, or you can choose the tribal at the beginning of the game or something. That would be kind of cool. I think that Scoia'tael has a lot of tribal stuff that they could still do more with. That's me. What about you guys?
Yeah, so when I tried to build a dwarf deck a while back, the big issue that I had was that there just weren't enough dwarfs that I wanted to put in my deck. There were like Mahakam defenders, there were the hand buff guys, there were a couple of golds, but there's nowhere near the depth in the card pool for dwarves as there is with elves. For elves, you can very easily build like 20 elf decks and have it be totally reasonable. With dwarfs, there's not really much of a payoff for doing that, and B, there's not enough dwarf cards that are good if you ever want to do that.
Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah, like Agitator's an interesting card. A bronze that hand buffs is cool, and like the Dwarven Mercenary obviously cares about dwarves and is fine as an engine. Like every archetype needs some sort of engine, I guess. But outside of that, like I think Gabor is a good card. But I mean, yeah, we're talking about like a competitive archetype, I guess, and I don't think dwarves necessarily are there. Last question for the day here, Dread Kamakan. What power level would you want bronze cards to be at? Would you want all 4 recruit cost cards to be able to achieve 6? 5s to achieve 6 or 7? What are you thinking? Well, for me, I feel like it's not about a card being able to achieve, like, it's all about consistency, and it's all about building your deck around it. Like, I think a good example right now, specifically, especially with Meve and the Trebuchet change, the Siege support. This is a card that has a low floor and a high ceiling. A low floor for a 4-point card being 2 doesn't feel that bad. A low point for a card that's 10 provisions being 2 feels awful. So a card at 4 should be very conditional and should be able to achieve 6. And the Siege support can achieve 6, but it's hard to do it. And I think that cards at 4 that can achieve 6 should be just like Siege support. They should all be like that. I mean, it's obviously every faction would have a different way of kind of displaying that sort of thing, but it's pretty clear that Northern Realms has like some cool cards like that are going to get better with Meve specifically. I would say
Siege support is a little bit too situational, but I agree with you in theory. Yeah,
being able to hit 6 or potentially 8 for a bronze card, you can't make it any better unless you make it better and make it a 1 charge.
Well, I mean,
you can make it
if you're going off that,
then charge. That'd be super.
I mean, Spot is a 14, right? If you're going off situational, like it's like Spot is a ridiculous card. It shouldn't have a ceiling that high for a floor of 2. I guess it's now a 5 provision card, but that was a bit silly on how high it is. I personally think with bronze cards, I think the bigger problem is more like synergy. I want to see more synergy as opposed to necessarily just pure points, right? I don't mind if you're playing a 4/4 if then it has like added synergy with, like, for example, Enforcer, right? It has added synergy. Magni doesn't necessarily have added synergy, right? So I don't necessarily want to see more cards like Magni, although at the moment, I mean, we need cards that are just decent. But I'd rather see some that are more like Enforcers that have synergy and then more to do with that synergy. I think that's one of the downsides to 2 bronze cards, right? It's hard to have this included like maximum synergy, right? Because you're only running 2 obs. But I mean, honestly, at this point with the card pool we have, even if you could run 3 obs, you probably wouldn't be able to get much archetype going, right? Because like there's just not enough support for most of the archetypes. So as opposed to seeing 4 provision cards get 6 value, I just want to see them have synergy, so to speak, so that I want to play them even if they're not necessarily getting value on themselves, they're giving my gold cards more value or stuff like that, right? I want to see more synergy in the bronze packages as opposed to just pure points.
And when I say I want to see situational 6s at 4, that's kind of what I mean. Like, I don't want them to just be like straight vanilla 6s.
No,
but it should be, if I build my deck to support this card, I should be able to get reasonable value out of it.
But consistently as well, right? It has to be consistent.
Like Pirate
Captain.
It has
to, exactly.
Or like a great example is Corsair. Like that's a card that's really good if you build a deck around it. And but the archetype of pirates and ships doesn't have a lot of support. Like Corsair is like on my watch list for the expansion, because if they add like a couple more good pirates and ships, like that thing can remove 5s all the time, right?
But honestly, slave infantry is like, it's overstated, right? If it ever got synergy, it would be well overstated. Problem is it doesn't really have any synergy. So it's just a well-stated card at them. But like that is, if you got some soldier synergy with Vreem, like you can get Vreemed up to 16 points, and then if that's just running 2 slave infantries. If you then start running like, ointments, Vigref, necromancy and stuff, Vreem gets loads and loads of points, right? That's the kind of synergy I want to see, only that's like a very, very, very small like package, right? And the other cards are all memes if you run them with it, right? But like that's the sort of thing I want to see more of, that sort of synergy, because like slave infantry is a decent card, but it improves your gold card, right? That's the sort of stuff I want to see from the bronze package.
Yeah, the idea that your bronzes are enhancing your golds, or the other way around in some way, like you're using them for you're using them
either
for,
way.
It's a deck building game. Like Gwent is like, so much of it takes place in the deck builder, and I've always loved that about this game, really. Especially when you're planning for a meta or planning for a tournament or just building a deck. And like these are the conversations I'm very excited to have when we get like the expansion, which we are expecting in April, which is just even saying the word expansion on this podcast fills me with so much joy. Expansion, new content, new cards. We just got new content today, new cards. Last time we received new cards, if you don't count the complete revamp of Homecoming, was the arena update, which was, what was that, March or so, right before Challenger 3, I think?
We got Hemdall.
Ah, true. We did get Hemdall.
Touche,
Trynet, touche. All right, guys, we can wrap this up here. This is a solid podcast. Thanks so much, guys. No drop frames. Happy podcast host right here. Let me know, guys, where can people find you out there when you're streaming? You guys are streaming a lot. KingChezz, let us know all your social deets.
Well, you can find me at KingChezz123 Twitch TV. And I guess you can follow me on Twitter too at KingChezz123. That's where you can find me. I stream 5 days a week, 11 a.m. CET for 5-6 hours a day, depending on how tilted I am by the end. That's where you can find me.
Yeah, and Trynet, what about you?
I am Trynet123 on Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch. I stream from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. 7 days a week, Eastern time.
Yeah, Eastern time. So you have a real this is just a quick side question. At that time slot for NA, do you pick that time slot for any particular reason? Is it just your lifestyle? That's just where you play? Do you also, the other side of it is, your chat, I assume, is mostly European audience, I would assume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I picked the time slot because it was when Pumpkin stopped streaming, so I was able to pick up Pumpkin hosts. And at the time slot was kind of open. There was no one else streaming. So it helped a lot for my growth. Yeah. And I just kind of stuck with it because changing time slots is a huge pain.
It is a huge pain. I hear that. Well, I mean, I hope for continued growth for both of you here. I think it was great. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you very much.
This was just fantastic. I guess that'll be it. So you can find me as well on Twitter at McBeard, McBeard, and on Twitch. You can find me on YouTube, youtube.com/c/McBeard, where you will find this podcast uploaded to the Commander's Horn playlist. And now that we have the patch in, there's lots to talk about. I'll be starting to make some more videos. We're going to go over those leaders, get some games in with Meave, and then just go from there. There's going to be a lot of cool stuff. I was kind of hesitant on judging everything before the patch hit. Now that we see the scope of these notes, we can see a little bit more about how these leaders are getting support as they entered the game, and how they're going to match up against the tried and true leaders that are already in the game. So I'm really excited to play Gwent later today. I will be cutting the stream, however, to make sure that this podcast gets wrapped up, posted, so you guys can all enjoy it today on Thursday, patch day, January 31st. But we'll wrap this up here. Once again, follow the podcast on Twitter at Commander's Horn, and you can email us at commandershornpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for coming on the show, King. Thanks for coming on the show, Trynet. And thanks so much for everybody in the chat for joining us today. That'll do it. Until next time, everybody, this is McBeard. Best of luck on the path.